Hello, welcome back to GOT. Today we're going to continue our battle with the Z Fold 7 and the Oppo Find N6. We're going to go ahead and compare the cameras this time. We're going to do battle between photos and videos, both day and night. And what's really different about this battle is both of them have 200 megapixel mains. So let's see how the 200 megapixels differ, if at all. Let's go. So we're going to jump right into the battle, but before we do, we're going to talk about the cameras real quick. They both have the 200 megapixel main shooter like we talked about, but this one, the Oppo, has a 50 megapixel 3x zoom, where this one has a 10 megapixel 3x zoom, and a 50 megapixel ultra wide on the Oppo, where you have a 12 megapixel ultra wide on the Samsung. So those numbers don't quite match up, but let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so we can see clearly here on the left, we have the Z Fold 7. On the right, we have the Oppo Find N6. So you can see they're both on the ultra wide, and the Samsung's quite a bit wider at 13 millimeters versus 15 millimeters over here on the Oppo. So the Oppo doesn't take in quite as much as you get on the Z Fold. However, it is a 50 megapixel lens. So let's go ahead and click in a couple clicks on this photo just to satisfy our curiosity on which one is clear. When you look at these things, you can see that the Samsung is pretty much just as clear here on this photo. Let's go ahead and zoom in a couple more, and let's look at the clarity of the bricks. You know, this is this darkening here on the Oppo. It just doesn't pick up a whole lot here. And on the Samsung, we've got the same kind of thing going on here. You can see that the Samsung's not as clear. You can see it starts to blur right away. So, you know, there's the difference between 50 megapixel and 12 megapixel lens. Let's go on to the next photo. This is your standard shot, and both of these are taken with the 200 megapixel lens, okay? Because the main lens is the 200 megapixel. So that's what both of these are. And you can see that for some reason the Oppo decided to add some sun flare because the sun was right overhead. This is close to noon when I took this photo, so you can see how they're both handling it. But let's go ahead and zoom in here on the street, on this building, and let's see how they both handle it. Now, this is a 200 megapixel zoom, so let's see what they're doing. Let's get in closer to the signs so we can read some differences. So here we go. There's zooming in, and let's do the same thing here on the Samsung. Get right on in there. Okay. Zoomed in a little bit, they look pretty much the same. I think, as far as reality, you might get a little more clarity here in the Oppo, but I think, you know, cropping in on these 200s is quite a task. You would think you could get something clearer, but remember, these are both bend down to 12 megapixels. I think there's a barbershop sign. Let's look at that barbershop sign. Let's do the same thing over here. So they're both bending down to 12 megapixels. So, you know, they're right there about even par. I wouldn't really pick one above the other on this. You would think with 200 megapixel, you'd get a bigger image, but we will later look at a 200 megapixel actual shot, saving it 200 megapixel, and we'll zoom in and see how they do. So let's go to the next photo here. This is a 3x zoom on both of them. Now, remember, the Samsung has a 3x 10 megapixel, and on the Oppo, it's a 3x 50 megapixel. And I think you can see the difference here just in the color right away. Let's go ahead and zoom in to the signage here, and we can see some differences. Definitely see that the Samsung is nowhere near as clear as the Oppo, and you can see that in the tattoo sign right there. Let's look at the image sizes on both of these. You've got a 3.2 megapixel, and you can see it's 3000 by 4000. So we have a little bit larger here, 4000 by 6000, and a 10 megapixel. So it actually, well, it's because we have a 50 megapixel lens, folks, if you want to know why. 50 megapixel versus 10. So you do gather a lot more data here on that zoom. So Samsung really needs to up their game on zooming capability with their lenses. Let's go on to the next one here. This one is actually a 10 times on both of them. And as you can see, again, the Z Fold is using that 10 megapixel to capture this 10 times zoom. And let's look at the file size again. And you can see, again, it's that small file size. Versus over here, we have a 50 megapixel on the N6 that is capturing that. So you can see why that is just so much clearer. Do we even need to zoom in anymore? I don't think so. You can see the clarity just right there. Let's go to the next photo. This is 20 times on both of them, just to see how they do, how they crush this 20 times. And I think that the Samsung is doing okay here, but nowhere near as clear here as the Oppo. It's just very clear winner here. 50 megapixel versus 10. You know, come on, Samsung, you need to do better than that. Now I'm going to move across the street here at another photo, and we're going to look at this. And this is where we're going to go ahead and test our 200 megapixel lenses. So what we've got here going on right now, this is a 200 megapixel shot. You can tell by the size of the file. And what I mean by 200 megapixel shot, you can set these phones here, as you can see on the Oppo, it's the Hasselblad section where you can actually save it as a 200 megapixel image or a 50 megapixel image. And on Samsung, you just have to go ahead and select it to save it at a 200 megapixel. And so if we look at that, you can see they're both, 12,000 by what? 16,000. So they're both nearly the same size. And as far as the file size, it's twice the size on the Oppo than it is on the Samsung. So that'll be interesting to zoom in on these. And let's take a look. I'm curious myself. I have not done this yet. Let's see how they look zoomed in. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go 5. And you would think that it would take a while for it to actually clear up. So that looks pretty good on the Samsung. You can see these signs way in the distance. Let's do here. Let's cropping in. Now this is cropping in on 200 megapixel lenses. So it's not a zoom, it's cropping in, and it looks like the Oppo is taking a little bit longer to process because it is a bigger file. Now, folks, that's the problem with using 200 megapixel lenses at their full capacity. You get really large files and they're slow to process on your computer. So they're a little more difficult to work with. But here we go. We've got the two of them together. I think the Samsung is actually quite a bit lighter. It's allowing more light in. You can actually see more detail, it appears. Let's go ahead and crop in just a couple more clicks on both of them and see how it looks. You can see the signage here really well. A couple more clicks here. And you can see they both look fairly decent. And as far as clarity, it's really hard for me to really make a call on this one. They're both looking really good. I do like to see the more detail here in the sky, where on the Samsung seems to be washed out a little bit. I think the whole photo kind of looks washed out, but over here on the Oppo, it might look even a little blurred. But, this is cropping in on a 200 megapixel lens, which you're not really supposed to crop in that far. Now let's go to the next photo here. This one is actually, I believe, a 50 megapixel on these. Let's check it out. Yeah, you can see it's about half the size, and the file's a little larger here, and same over here. Okay, about half the size. So they're both the same size. So this is 50 megapixel. Now let's go ahead and crop in on these and see what happens here. 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go 6. Notice how it came into focus a lot faster than the 200 megapixel. That's because it's a bit smaller file. Now, what's the difference here? Well, for some reason, the Oppo really outperformed the Samsung. The Samsung's not doing too well. Again, we'll check this. They are the same size file here, actually. As far as pixel goes, they're really close. So it's the 50 megapixel lens, but for some reason, Samsung had a hard time with this. Now, these are both on tripods, so there's no excuse. This is not blur from me moving or anything, or motion blur. That's just what happened when you cropped in. That's quite interesting. But let's go on to the next one. Now, this right here is the 50 megapixel zoomed in. So here's the deal. On the Oppo with the Hasselblad, you can only zoom in on the 50 megapixel setting, and you can go up to 3 times. On the 200 megapixel setting, there is no zooming in. But on the Samsung, you can actually zoom in 3 times on 200 megapixel and 5 times on the 50 megapixel. So that's pretty nifty. So this is the 50 megapixel right here, zoomed in at 3 times on both of them. And now you can see here that the image, again, is the large 50 megapixel size. Oh no, this is the 12 megapixel. I'm sorry, I did it on the 12 megapixel. So let's compare these two. The 12 megapixel will go 3 times. That's right, I forgot about that. So let's go ahead and let's zoom in on both of them and let's see how they handle this. So here we go. And then on this one, we're gonna go ahead and So there we are, zoomed in. Now, for some reason, I don't understand. This file size is large on the Samsung, insinuating that this is the 200 megapixel lens. But why in the world is it so blurry? Where this right here, you can tell by the file size that this is the 50 megapixel lens, but it's so much cleaner. So, so what if you can zoom in 3 times or 5 times if it comes out like that? That's kind of ridiculous. This is really clean here on the Oppo. But I do have another lens, another photo here, and that's this one here. And this one is what? This one, is this one the 50 megapixel? Let's see, this one is the 50 megapixel shot zoomed in. That's right. So I zoomed in on the 50 megapixel as well. And this one's a 5 times zoom. So this is looking a little cleaner. And if we do a couple clicks to kind of catch up with the Oppo, see, now that's a lot better with the 5 times lens. Let's go back one. This is a 5 times zoom on the 50 megapixel setting. So it looks like the 50 megapixel is doing better than the 200 megapixel setting. So who needs the 200 megapixel if you get a better shot from the 50? That's crazy. I like this shot much better than that 200. That was bad. And just to show you the difference, I don't know why I didn't take one on the Oppo, but I didn't. This is the bending down to a 12 megapixel shot here on the standard camera. This is the 200 megapixel camera, in other words, but bending down to 12. And if we go ahead and zoom in here, you can see the difference. It's not good at all. So you see that's kind of bad. Let's go over here. I'm going to take this 200 megapixel and let's take this thing and let's drag it over here and let's take a look at it. This right here, this is the 200 megapixel zoomed in versus their 50 megapixel on the Samsung. So you can see the 50 megapixel zoomed in is doing better than the 200. Even if I back off one here, it's doing a whole lot better. That's crazy. Now, how's that doing against the standard? This is the standard. Okay, it's beating the bending down photo. It's bending down to 12 megapixels, but that's crazy. 200 megapixel is not doing as well as the 50 megapixel setting. And then again, if we compare that to the Oppo's 50 megapixel setting, I like to look at this chalkboard right here. You can see there's quite a clear image here on this one. And let's zoom in here and see how does it look on here. Yeah, you can see it's still clear here on the Oppo. There you go. That's the daylight shooting, and I really think the Oppo really kind of outperformed the Samsung in all the really different images. Although the Samsung can zoom more at the 200 megapixel setting, but I think it's really just cropping, and it sure feels like it's bending down because the quality is really poor. So let's go ahead and look at some night photos on both of them. So on the night shots, I went ahead and forego the ultra wide because ultra wide just it just doesn't do that well at night. So here we've got both of them, and this is your 200 megapixel lens. And let's go ahead and zoom in. You can see that the Oppo is much brighter, allowing more detail in with the light. And that's because but I'm not quite sure why that is. I was going to say because the Samsung has a lower f-stop, which that will help add a little more light. And believe it or not, the Samsung actually has a slightly larger 200 megapixel lens. I mean, just barely, but it is a little bit larger, so it should be doing a little better. But as you can see here, maybe it's just Samsung just doesn't know how to deal with the night photos all that well. I think that the Oppo is much more pleasing. Others may think differently, but this is a better representation of what the sign actually looks like. Let's go on to the next photo here. Next photo is a quick zoom in here at 3 times, and you can see here they're both about the same, although the Samsung we know now is using a 10 megapixel zoom. So if we go ahead and crop in, edit it all here, 1, 2, 3, let's just use this signage here as a representation here. Can we see any of the reading on the sign there? Can you read the sign here? Let's go a click a little closer and see if we can actually read the sign. Yeah, you can read the sign here, and can we do it here? Yeah, that's the difference, folks, between, again, 10 megapixel and 50 megapixel zoom at night. But they are both doing quite well, I'd say, at night, though, if you just snap and keep that photo. Again, here is your standard view inside the shopping area. We do have overhead lighting. This is actually white lighting up above. And as you can see, the Oppo is still allowing a little more light in. On to the next photo here. Let's see the sizes on these real quick. You see this is the standard size. It's the 4000 by 3000, and same over here. Check it out. Same thing. Now, if we go down to the next photo, this one is using the 50 megapixel dedicated lens, capturing it at 50 megapixel. And you can see here is the larger file on both of them. Let's go ahead and we'll zoom in on this sign here and see how well they do. Can we actually read that sign? Yes, we can read it pretty good here. And then on this one, let's go. Yeah, we can still read it here too. I think is it clear here? You can see the ground. The ground is much clearer here on the Oppo than it is on the Samsung. Again, this is using that 200 megapixel lens at the 50 megapixel size of saving the photo. I think you still have a clear photo here. You can even see it in the tree and such on the Oppo. Then we go to the next photo here, and you can see here we've got, this one is the 200 megapixel lens, okay, or 200 megapixel, saving it at 200 megapixel. I don't really know how else to say that. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this one, close that out of the way, and we've got me in the image there. Let's see how well they do. Can you still make me out? Yeah, just barely. And it's still kind of, I don't know if it's doing some AI wizardry here. You know, actually, if you take a look at them for what they are, I think the Samsung did a better job. This is AI trying to really clear it up and add some color. I don't like that. I think Samsung did much better on this photo than we did on the Oppo, both again using that 200 megapixel lens, and we're just cropping in on them. So I think that the Samsung did better at night on this one simply because of all the AI digitizing we got going on here. Now, skipping to another photo here, we've got, this is just the standard lens again, but it is 3x zoom on both of them. And you can see they're pretty comparable. Samsung's doing all right here on the standard. These are bending down to 3 megapixels. I think you've got a little more color, and yeah, you got a little more detail here on this tree on the Oppo. Let's go to the next photo here. So this next photo, I tried to match them up at 6x because Oppo has a 6x dedicated, you know, button here, and I just tried to match it up here on the Samsung. And you can see, I believe that the Oppo is definitely doing better on that, because again, this is a 50 megapixel versus a 10 megapixel. Although for being just 10 megapixel, Samsung's doing pretty well. But let's really look at it in the dark here. This is your standard shot right here in the dark. Now in this photo, they're both at 10x zoom here at night, and Samsung's not doing too bad. It's looking pretty clear. You know, I wouldn't have any complaints on this, but if you try to zoom in on that sign in the back, neither one of them are readable. So, you know, you can see the Samsung's a little more blurry, especially on the bushes. So you got a little more clarity in the Oppo. But again, you got a 50 megapixel lens. And then we go down here. This is 20x zoom on both of them here at night. And I think it's going to be clear here. But the Oppo is definitely clearer. Now here's a portrait at night. And I think they're both set on zooming in 3x at night. And you can see they're both pretty decent. Samsung looks a little duller, a little more colorful on the Oppo. So it really all depends on your personal preference. I think the Oppo's really got a lot of brightness into it. And it might be a little clearer for that, but it's really going to be a personal call on these. And then this is your standard shot here on both of them. And I actually think I like the Samsung better, although I had the camera a little bit lower here, so that angle looks kind of funky. But I think I like the Samsung better on this one, where there's just a lot of that artificial bokeh in the background on the N6. It's just not that pleasing to me. So there you go. At night, I think it's a little closer at night. Samsung's doing better because they have that special nighttime photography feature that they have in their phone. And I think it's working here. It's doing a little bit better at night. And I really do think that Samsung does a little bit better at portrait because of all that official, that artifacting that you get in the N6. Now, to be honest and fair and transparent, the N6, you can adjust that. You can turn that down. This is just out of the box, out of the gate, where it's set up when you first start using it. So I didn't do any fine tuning, but you can definitely turn down that bokeh and even, I think, turn off the AI on the Oppo. Now let's take a quick look at videos. Now looking at this, you can see right away that it's a little bit brighter on the Oppo, and it kind of even blows out the sky a little bit. You can just barely make out the clouds. So I don't really care for that. I like the coloring better on the Samsung for sure. The Z Fold is doing really good here. And the Oppo it's doing good. It's clear, but it just seems a little bit brighter and washing out everything. So the color accuracy is not quite there. Now, when you turn them around, things change a little bit. It looks a little better. You can still see the trees in the background are washed out just a little bit, and even that truck going by. So I do like, I don't know, it's a hit and miss on the Oppo, it looks like. But the Samsung, I think, is doing a little bit better on the brightness. Now, here we are at night. You can see they're both doing pretty good, but it looks like, again, the Oppo is washing out the scene here. Look at the lights there, how they're just, you can't really make them out, where in the Samsung is doing a really good job balancing. So Samsung's done really well with their coloring here at night. And then when you look at this sign, you see Samsung adjusted to it right away. Oppo did not. I had to touch the screen to get it to adjust. Not quite sure. Maybe I don't have it on, you know, auto white balance, but I'm pretty sure I do. So we look at here and you can see same difference. And I think, I don't know, I like it's more focused, it seems like. It's clear on the Samsung. For some reason, the Oppo is just struggling here at night. So we're gonna go ahead and check the audio in the video right here. So you can see it's well lit up here at night. I wonder how good these are doing. I don't have the best of light, so we'll really be able to test these phones in low light. So how are they doing? How's the audio? Are they blocking out the background noise? The freeway here is just a couple blocks away. It's above everything, and I can hear the traffic flowing. But it doesn't sound like you can hear, probably can't hear them on the phone. So I'm just curious how well they're doing. Are they picking up my audio? Are they cutting out the background? Which one's louder? You know, so we'll see that here in the studio. So there you go. There's a video at night and some audio testing. Now you can see it seems like Oppo has an issue at night, you know, and I found that in a lot of the Chinese phones. They don't have nighttime photography or nighttime video mastered just yet. Photography maybe a little better. So you can see here that Samsung really prevails at nighttime video. And as far as the audio goes, they're pretty evenly matched. I wouldn't really choose one over the other due to the audio. Now, there is one thing I want to clear up from my previous video, and that's multitasking. Let's take a quick look at this. So in our previous video, we talked about multitasking, and we showed that they could both split, and they could both split on top of each other right here. But this one went to this two screen where they're full screens, and I could not, there's no option actually to make it go like we see here on the Samsung where it's 1:1 split screen. Okay, and we can do the left to right split again here on both of these, which was very odd. I thought it was very odd that it wouldn't do it. Well, that just happened to be that particular app set. So let me show you here. We'll open up two different apps and we see that it will do it. So let's go ahead and just open up. Let's say, for instance, if you're driving here and we do the two split there, and let's open up YouTube Music. Now they're split. Okay. Now let's do the same thing over here. We'll open up the maps and a two-finger split here from the side, as you can see here. And then we can go YouTube Music. It's going to be all the way down the bottom. See, I like the way it splits here. It's a lot easier. Okay, now they're both split. And now we can do the top to bottom. Split, split. See, now it's a 50-50 split. And then can you go ahead and go up here? You can go up to split here. You can do this, I believe, on both of them. And is that as close as you can get, or can you go a little bit more? Well, on the Samsung, you can go all the way up, so it's a full page. So it's about the same on either one. Let's bring this back up to center point. So as you can see, you can do the same thing here on both, and you can actually swap them just as well. So you can do the 50-50 split on top and bottom on the Oppo, which I didn't demonstrate on the last one because I used the wrong apps apparently. So there you go. How do you like the two phones? I think they're very compatible for the most part. When it comes to videos, I think Samsung is on top, the Z Fold. It is definitely on top by a long way in video. As far as photo, I would give it definitely to the Oppo. I think it does better. And its 200 megapixel lens, I think actually captures just a little bit more detail than what we get in the Z Fold. However, the Z Fold does have a little more options in zooming with that 200 megapixel lens in the 50 or 200 megapixel setting. So there's the big difference. Then we saw that the Oppo did better with the Hasselblad 250 megapixel settings. Even when you were able to zoom with the 50 megapixel, I think it outperformed the Z Fold. So there's that. Now that I've wrapped up this comparison, what do you think? I want to hear from you. Does one look more appealing to you than the other? Is Samsung still behind with the other cameras other than the 200 megapixel? What do you think? Leave a comment down below. And of course, if there's anything I missed in this review, let me know. I'd like to hear from you as well in the comments below. If you got something out of this video, do me a favor and smash that like button because it really does help out the channel. And if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do that so you don't miss out on further content. If you didn't see the first part of this review, check it out here. Until next time, have a wonderful day and God bless.